Hello and welcome to the 12th episode of the Adamola Bookmen podcast with me, Al Bond, and my co-host, Johnny Coughlin. This week, we're doing our first manager. It's Arsene Wenger.
Yeah, Arsene Wenger and his passion for football.
He has a good deal of passion for football. Johnny, Arsene Wenger, thoughts. This is not some obscure fella. This is someone who's dominated our football watching lifetimes, right?
Yeah, as a United fan who would have been, I guess, 12 or 13 when he became the manager of Arsenal, this is a figure who loomed large. The Darth Vader of my youth.
Yeah, he has got a Vader-like quality. Yeah, he didn't loom so much in Nottingham Forest supporters' consciousness. But he was certainly, you could make the case he's the most significant figure in modern British football, couldn't you, in a way?
Yeah, well, I'm sure, exactly. You could definitely make a case for it. And I think he makes a good case for himself without being boastful in this book, right?
Yes. Yeah, I guess he does. All right, Johnny, I did not like this book. I did not like it one bit.
Go on, tell me why.
Oh, all right, I'll give you. He's not braggadocious. He's not. But nor is he interesting or illuminating or insightful for my money. I think less than about Arsene Wenger than when I started the book.
Go
If
on.
that seems possible. Okay. I know how his career started out and stuff. But that man, he keeps a tight ship, right? You don't learn a great deal
What
other
about
than
it?
that he really is really, really passionate about football.
What about his passion?
Oh, his passion for football.
I liked it. I enjoyed it. But if sensible economic management is your thing, this is the book for you. It's interesting, I suppose, the journey of Wenger from a coach to kind of more like a football director and the slings and arrows that he had to endure. But then he doesn't even get into that part of it,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. Did he endure slings and arrows, Johnny?
You you
Because
you wouldn't think it from reading the book, right?
I, I mean, I guess we could go on. We go on the timeline, but the Arsenal unrest at the end. I can remember watching a rugby game from New Zealand, and there was like a Wenger out poster in the crowd at a rugby game in New Zealand,
It's nice.
and this was all summed up with the fans were becoming frustrated. That was it. That was what you got. The fans were a bit frustrated. That is what you got of 2-3 years
Yeah.
of intense Wenger scrutiny.
Yeah. And on that point, I don't think he says anything negative about anyone in the book.
Yeah, you're right. You're
I,
right.
I don't think he has a dig. I don't think the closest he gets, I think, is when he talks about Anelka. He essentially says stuff that we know that Anelka is kind of difficult, and he was surly, and he kind of put. One thing I did learn is that Wenger was a bit of he poached a lot of players right out from under the noses of other clubs, a little underhanded at times, I think. But one of the things he got Anelka from PSG when he was very young. And then when Anelka arrived, he immediately wanted to leave Arsenal. And then he kind of talks about how whatever, maybe it didn't fully turn out as much as Anelka might have wanted it to have been. And he kind of offers his rationale for why that was without directly attacking Anelka. But it was about as close as he got to ever saying anything negative about anyone. Even people like someone like Van Persie. You think he might have been a bit burnt by that, but all he has to say is that he said that Van Persie was a bit arrogant, maybe initially. And then he says he was a total class act as a player. But there's no mention of Jose. There's no mention of Pardew. That's the stuff we want, isn't it?
Yeah, there is almost no mention of Jose at all. I think the only time you see him is he pops up in the back, and when you look at the statistics, his entirety of Jose Mourinho is played 19, won 2, drawn 7, lost 10. He has 10% win record against Jose. So yeah, I'm surprised he doesn't mention it.
So again, I listened to this book and Arsene reads it there's times when I had to rewind and just I still didn't understand certain things because he's got a thick accent.
Yes, he has. It has not been diminished by living in London. Well, he didn't even really live in London, did he?
He
Like
lived,
he lived in his house and he went to the Arsenal training ground and the Arsenal stadium. He says he knows almost nothing about the places he's lived in. Because all he
yeah,
does is just he goes home. I mean, this is a football pervert, isn't it? I mean, like totally. Like goes home after a day managing a club and watches like three games, and then off to bed, up again at 5:30, an hour and a half of gym work, and then it's back to the football.
yeah. And on that, right, I thought this. We could get into the book in a minute, but just on his passion, he describes his relationship with his wife, and this is the quote about his wife: "We have a friendly relationship, and we respect one another."
Hot, sexy passion. This is what I was looking for
Yeah,
in
this
my
is this.
football autobiography. There is sex, Johnny, because he had a kid. So
Yeah,
that the sex is implied. So he's left it open to our mind to consider how his daughter was conceived, like, and I know that I have. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
It's not going to be the football sex book that you've craved for so long.
Oh, when will this be, Johnny? When will it be? All right then. Well, then, shall we get started?
Yeah, go on. Let's get
All
into it.
right. So he grew up in Dudlenheim in the Alsace region of France.
He's an
He's
Alsatian.
he's born in 1949, right? Is that right?
Yeah, so post-war France, he's going around in his short trousers, going around France speaking Alsatian. That's his native language. And I listened to Alsatian on YouTube, and that is
That's an easy joke there. Like, how does it sound?
it's a Germanic language, so it sounds like German.
He grew up in Alsace in a small village. He said he had like three ironmongers in the village. The plows were pulled still by horses. It was a different time, like really. I mean, he says the village where he grew up is no longer there. It's just all part of a conurbation now.
But his passion remains so obviously with Jose, you have the kind of arrival of managers who were not professional footballers. And I knew that Wenger wasn't a top player, but I thought he was a professional player. But not really.
Yeah, I think he was right, but he was generally what a substitute and stuff like
Mostly amateur, and then he played for this
Strasbourg.
yeah, but like his playing stats, I think he played for them like I'll tell you exactly. He played for them 11 times.
Oh, is that
And
right? It really was just 11 times.
that was up until that was over a 3 year period, and he retired when he was like 30. And he doesn't say anything specifically about injuries. It's because he was a big nerd who was around all the time. And what's impressive is that he managed to stay around foot. Like you would think that football, the football environment, maybe it's different on the continent or something, or was that they would embrace the kind of the nerd, but they would have been chased right out of town when I was a kid if they just were just hanging around. But I guess this is his passion, right? He just persisted.
All right. Well, if we can just go back a little bit, because I want to bring a bit of a tabloid element back into it. So, anything interesting about his father, Johnny? Anything interesting about his Arsene Wenger's dad?
He
Oh,
was
he fought for the Nazis on the Russian front. Yes, yes, he did. So Wenger's dad was a Nazi. Let's not try. I mean, he tried to claim it. He was conscripted against his will, but
yeah,
he fought on the Russian front. He fought on the Russin front, lad, for the
yeah,
Nazis. So,
yeah, yeah.
all right. Well, I wanted to just crowbar that bit in before we moved away from it. And his dad ran an inn,
His mother had a bistro.
yeah, bistro. And this is we learned all this in chapter one, the child who dreamt about football.
Yeah, those
I
like
mean, bloody hell.
he gives up on those titles. He
He
gets
does
them.
give up on those titles, and he does well to give up on those
The
titles.
first one is the boy who dreamt, and then the next one is something like the adolescent who was kind of playing, but then later it's just like Arsenal.
Yeah, it is. It is some the bullshit you get in chapter one. Like, so he's talking about his customers at the bistro, the men of the village. It was odd to see people admire my father's customers drinking so much and sometimes turning violent. They needed to be restrained. That made a huge impression on me. but it gave me strength and an incredible instinct. How the fuck did that give you strength and an incredible instinct? Well, I've been in a boozer where people have had a fight. It's like, well, this is an unpleasant turn, but from it, I've drawn strength, and I believe I've added to my incredible instinct. What the fuck is he rabbiting on about? Dear God. And the
There,
first chapter is just full of these portentous statements, a lot of adjectives. Passion's not about inspiration. He likes inspiration.
obsession.
Here's another one about his childhood, right? So, Wenger used to play on the streets with other kids, right? And they didn't have their own specialist jerseys. All right. So, unlike most kids playing on the street who get into uniform, we played with no jerseys, no coach, and no referee. Yeah, you're not that unusual, I said. Having no jerseys was invaluable because it forced us to look up and develop a peripheral vision, to acquire vision that was deeper. Oh, yeah, you see, that's the valuable learning you got from the streets. It's your deeper vision that you got from playing jumpers for fucking goalposts. All right, son, calm down. I mean, honestly, chapter one is just full of this bullshit, like all the time. Like, anything that is in black, a weakness, I made into a strength.
The mental image of Wenger as a child is a hard thing to muster, isn't it? He just seems like one of those people that was born as a 45-year-old.
Yeah, he was born as a 45-year-old, right? Yeah, no, I mean, there's pictures of him when he was a kid, and he's just like, look at Arsene Wenger in a funny wig. Look, there he is. Like, yeah, he was an old man when he arrived.
You mentioned when we did the Maradona book about how Maradona would name check everyone. I think in the earlier, like, in the Arsenal years, I think there's a paragraph on every player that ever played for him. And it's all positive, and parts of it I did find interesting. But when he's younger and he's talking about fellas in France, it's totally it's totally meaningless to me. But he talks
Well,
about it, the various people who kind of helped him along his kind of path to becoming a coach.
he did a degree in economics, right? So I guess that came in useful. And wherever he was a manager, he seemed to be a little bit more than a manager. He mentions at one of his clubs, like he bought like 100 balls and got a great price on it and was super happy to have done that.
Well,
So
he
his
talks
role was
about it.
there.
He returns to that later. Anyway, go
Yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, about 100 balls essentially becomes the Emirates, right? I mean, that is essentially the extension of that.
Yes, I went from negotiating for individual balls to flying around in private jets, I think he says towards the end.
Still a bit of the bean counter, and not in a negative way. I don't mean that in a negative way, and I don't mean to get totally on his back over this book. It's just passionless.
Yeah, it was a bit bloodless to be fair. It's certainly dry. What do you think Arsene Wenger's net worth is?
Ooh, 50 mil.
Oh, look at this, Al. Yeah. Yeah, 48 million. I read
Ah,
$48 million.
oh,
I
if
read
there
it.
was just some sort of way that I could turn my successfully answering your questions into financial gain, like, yeah, because I'm nailing them, aren't I? Every week. Just keep giving them, Johnny. Keep giving them to me. Yeah, that sounds
Okay.
about right. 50 mil. He's got a few
Do you
quid.
want do you want more? Do you want more
Yeah,
questions
yeah,
then?
yes, I do.
No, sorry, just on that point, the reason that came to mind is you said he was a bean counter, and along the way he's invested in various kind of football analytics, stats kind of companies. He started, and this was back in his Monaco days, and then more recently as well. So he has invested in these things, and I wonder if he made much money there. And obviously, he was a manager of Arsenal, so he probably got a lot of money for that. Okay, tell the truth now. If you have actually remember this figure from the book, you have to be honest. Okay,
I will be,
how
Johnny.
okay? How many games, official matches, was he in charge of Arsenal for?
Uh,
To the closest 100.
600.
Uh, uh,
No.
uh. No, much more. Double that.
I suppose so. 22 years. Yeah, I'm stupid, eh? 1200.
I just told you to double it. So yeah, yes.
Look at this, eh? I've done it again. Nailed it.
1,235. And how many? So I calculated just giving 90 minutes per game, like whatever, discounting ones that went to extra time and all the rest of it. That's 77 straight days of football. And then how many transfers did he oversee in his time at Arsenal, do you
Oh,
think?
no, I did read this. It was like 450, right?
Exactly. You've made you've made up for it. For
Hey,
450.
That is astonishing, though, isn't it? So, well, so at 450 divided by 22 is about 20, right? Give or take. So it's 20 transfers every year, in and
Yeah.
out, I guess.
Yeah, and I suppose there's young fellas that would be leaving, before they make the first team and whatever else. And he's in the detail, right? So I'm sure he seemed to be involved in everything. The one that kind of got away for him, the only one I think when he was talking about the transfers that kind of he regrets is Nabry, I think, Serge Nabry.
Yeah, he does mention that, isn't it? Like that, yeah, just he had a bad injury, never really settled, and then now he's kicking ass at
But anyway,
Bayern
we're
Munich.
we're getting ahead of ourselves. So what happened was he had a fairly non-event of a career, but he was hanging around the clubs and kind of becoming involved in coaching from a very young age. So it wasn't a case that he became a coach because he was injured, but he was essentially trying to be a coach even when he was in principle a player. I said that he played 11 times for Strasbourg. He played a total of 67 games in his career. That's over 12 years. So
Satisfying career, 5 games a year. You loving it?
5 games a year, yeah. So yeah. But then I think what I liked is he would kind of give some philosophical things that like football philosophical things or technical things. He would say a footballer's ability. And this is dry now, just saw three things down to their touch and their control, their decision making, and their precision of execution.
Yeah,
Is that not enough for you?
I think that does sound accurate, doesn't it? You
And
know,
he's
my touch is good, my decision making is good. Ah, but the fitness, I'm not good at
no,
that
no,
part.
precision of execution. So how good you are. You've made the choice, then you have to execute. He doesn't say anything about the physical side of things, actually.
Well, I mean, he does say plenty about the physical side of things, in as much as like the great ketchup and Coke tragedies. Like, yeah, didn't they say like after his first match, like the Arsenal players were all singing like, "We want our cocaine back." Yeah, bloody hell, Coca-Cola back. We're all like singing they wanted their Coke. Let's cut all this shit out. All right, so
Just on that, he says at one point, like it is a humorless book. He says there was a joke that I made. The players had a joke that I made them eat broccoli morning, noon, and night. But in fact, I don't care much for broccoli.
oh, it's just
Yeah,
classic Arsene there, just
yeah.
pure gold.
Anyway, so
I
sorry.
just tried
Okay,
to impersonate his laugh. Have you ever seen him laugh? I don't think I ever have. I was thinking about it, like thinking about how humorless the book is. Have you ever seen him laugh?
no, he's like George Costanza's mother. Costanza, Costanza says that his mother had never laughed.
I can't remember him laughing. I remember Fergie laughing and stuff. Like I just can't picture Wenger laughing at all. Maybe a
Not,
dry. Maybe that's it. Like,
yeah. Remember
and he
Ian
thought
Wright.
about broccoli or something. Like, don't much like the taste of that. And that's it.
Remember Ian Wright describing him, seeing him going around the marble floors of Highbury or on roller skates or rollerblades, and this totally confused Wenger. So yeah, he
Yeah, it
doesn't
didn't
laugh.
make it into the book though, did it? Like, because that would have been a moment of light relief, wouldn't it? I mean, I would have liked to have heard Arsene's
Mm.
viewpoint on that. Like, they came into the marvelous and there was Ian Wright on roller skates. What is this man doing? Just as a fun bit, like we talked about Ian Wright leaving Arsenal from Ian Wright's perspective, but apparently David Dean's daughter was in the room whilst they
silently,
were selling Ian Wright, and she was bawling her eyes out,
silently weeping into her dinner.
silently weeping. Very dignified. Yeah, a very dignified way of expressing your sadness at Ian Wright leaving the team. Well, there you go. I mean, I guess Wrighty missed that bit because it didn't pick up in his book out. I'd like to have heard about that. The
Yeah,
chairman's daughter silently weeping in the corner as he's fucked off to West Ham.
yeah. So okay, he became involved in coaching when he was at Strasbourg, but then he went to Cannes, and that's really kind of where his story begins. I think he was an assistant coach at Cannes in
Yeah,
League
sweet deal, man.
in League Two. Yeah, in League Two, and then he went to Nancy, and he was there for 3 years, beginning in 1984, finishing 12th, 18th. But then he was relegated.
But he made such a good impression. He got a top job, didn't he?
Yeah, he got the Monaco job. He was offered Monaco and PSG. He took Monaco. Wenger says that losing, he says this in the context of Nancy, losing made him physically sick. He had to stop the bus once. Can you imagine what imagine what the players thought as the manager stopped the bus so he could get out and vomit as a result of having lost.
I vomit after football losses. I vomited after Forest conceded the 99th minute loss to Liverpool. I genuinely, literally went to the bathroom and vomited. And
Really?
I vomited last year as well when Brentford scored a winner against us in added on time.
Anyway, so did you know that he signed Glenn Hoddle for Monaco?
Yes, yes, I did. He was
And
off
did
to
you?
PSG, right?
He was poached. And was there anything that surprised you about his description of Hoddle?
He was a man of God
Man of
who read his
God.
Bible on the bus.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe it's different in the bus in France. Managers puking and players reading the
Let's read
Bible.
the old Bible.
He talks about technical empathy.
Yeah,
Do you know what that is?
no.
So a player should put himself in the shoes or in the boots of the player he's about to pass to. And that's how a player will understand how to wait the pass. That's called a term that he made up, Al, technical empathy. But he says, like, so there's a kind of a, you know, the way Ferguson wrote, Ferguson's second book's called Leadership, right? I haven't read it, but it's kind of is it kind of directed at kind of management consultancy type pipes?
Doesn't sound very sexy.
No, but there's an element of that to this book. I think it's kind of high performancy, this book.
Yeah, it is. I guess it is high performancey.
Mm. But so he says things like 2/3 of people apply themselves more if their qualities are recognized. So Al, you were doing a great job.
Oh, I feel 10 foot high now, Johnny. Thank you so much. I'll be more
He's,
funny
he
and I'll do
says
more Arsene Wenger impressions, seeing as you're enjoying them.
30% of people don't implement instructions for a range of reasons, including a lack of faith in themselves and a lack of understanding of the instructions.
Now, that's true, isn't it, Johnny? That's true. I'm always worried I'm going to do something wrong. So, yeah, it's
There
better
you,
not to do something than do something wrong.
and he also says, as a manager, if you want to say something negative to a player, you have to say three positive things.
Well, how
They're
does that
not
make a fucking sandwich, Johnny? You can't make a sandwich with three. It's meant to be like a negative sandwich, right? Two positives, and the
really.
negative bit is the meat.
Well, this
But now
is,
three, you see, well, there he goes, eh? He knows what he's talking about.
yeah. So
Johnny, your
nice.
hair looks nice, new haircut, and your
Mhm.
voice is lovely.
Hmm.
Also,
Come on,
you've
one
done a
more.
great job with your technical setup there. It looks good from where I'm sitting.
Right, but
But you're very boring, like so. But yeah, your hair, Johnny. Remember what I said about your hair?
yeah, he did say that thing about my hair. So did you know he had okay, so he signed Hoddle. Did you know he had signed George Weah?
I don't think I knew that until this book. So there you go. I did learn something.
There you go. And that was interesting. And he was kind of he described him as pitiful when he arrived. He got him that pitiful. Like they signed him like from he was playing in Cameroon when they signed him. So he got him in that pitiful. But anyway, that's how he described them.
That's a scouting network, though, isn't it? Like, look
But
at the old Cameroon lads.
this is the early 90s, like well, Weah's Liberian, of course, former president.
I knew that. I just you said you got it from a
Mm,
team in Cameroon.
mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, your hair looks nice still, Johnny, but you're a pedantic prick. But you've got a lovely smile.
Did you know that he was such a big success at Monaco?
I think he must have done all right to be at Monaco. But
The
no, I
way
didn't. No, I'd be a liar to say that I knew.
because the way it's always packaged with the Arsene Who stuff is that like he was an absolute no mark, but he'd been offered the Bayern job and stuff before he went to Japan. He did very well at Monaco. He was there for I think 6 or 7 seasons for 7 years, and he won the league in his first year. So that was a pretty good start. And yeah, he was offered the Bayern job, but Monaco. This was later, but Monaco wouldn't let him go. Then when he did leave, he went off to Japan because there was a lot of money going to Japan at the time which is the other part of it, I suppose, which maybe is not something that you'd really think about now because, remember, like, so he went to Grampus at the same club that Lineker had played for the year that Lineker left. So there was obviously some people going to Japan at the time.
Yeah, it's nuts to think about that now. Japan being the money bed.
Yeah. Do you think that he liked the attitude of people in Japan?
Yes, yes, he did. He did like the attitude of people in Japan. Well, that's what he
Yeah.
talks about. Hey, it's self-improvement, right? And like, it's that self-analysis.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he was totally into it, like the work ethic, the dedication of the players. He said there were 35 players in the squad when he arrived and he wanted to reduce it to 20, but he found it very difficult because they were all so goddamn dedicated. An interesting thing about Wenger and his number two, who he subsequently brought to Arsenal,
Borrow, yeah.
Boro Primorac, he and Wenger lived together while they were in Japan. And then when he went to Arsenal, he said, at this time, Boro and his wife got a house of their own. It's just the way he described it. Like that was the unusual part.
I said like a third wheel in this situation.
There
But
you
he
go.
might as well have not been in Japan Zen because he just lived in his little house, went to the training ground, didn't see anything of Japanese culture apart from one sport he liked, which I just thought was, oh, you're gonna crowbar this in. Like you learned something from football from sumo wrestling, did you, Arsene? No, come on, son.
Yeah, of course. You have to win two championships to become a Yokozuna. Did you know that? Huh?
Yes, I did. I happen to know a bit about sumo wrestling.
Go on.
Remember the golden days, like back then, like when when he was in Japan, like the best yokozuna was China Fuji, who was
Hmm.
like a little bloke, but swift and like turned people. There's also Kanishki, the dump truck. This is all early 90s sumo knowledge, mate. Kanishki, he was also a yokozuna. He was Hawaiian.
Hmm.
And my personal favorite, Mwatazumi, the salt shaker. That salt went fucking everywhere when he was shaking it, son. My dad
Okay.
had business in Japan when we were kids, and we all like got like a Japan thing going on. We had a sumo wrestling morning once, me and my brother, where we were in our underpants and ate rice, and then did sumo wrestling in the living room.
It's around this time he met his wife, Annie, who didn't go to Japan with him. There wasn't space in the house with him and Boro.
Well, no room for the passion. Like it would have been embarrassing for him.
Yeah. He went to a match in Highbury and he was outside catching a lighter off someone. That was
Catching the light.
unexpected.
Who suggested he goes to watch an Arsenal game though? Who suggested it to him?
Oof.
Glenn Hoddle. It was
Oh,
Glenn Hoddle inadvertently made a rod for Spurs' back for 22 years. Yeah, it was Glenn Hoddle who advised him to go to watch an
yeah.
Arsenal game.
Why didn't he send him to? He sent Christian Gross to Spurs, and he sent
Yeah, there you go.
he
Like
sent
he went on the
Arsene.
tube.
He was at a match in Highbury. He went outside and asked a random woman for a lighter, and it was David Dean's wife's friend, and he managed to get an invite to a charades night at David Dean's house.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it wasn't just that, was it? It's like they must have been going like, that's Arsene Wenger, who's a top level manager. It
Hmm.
wasn't just like, if you could do later, please.
It's
Come,
strange.
come, charismatic Frenchman, and join our party. Like, surely it didn't happen like that.
Yeah. So that's it, right? So he was a success in Japan but it was time to move on. He'd been in touch with Dean. Dean wanted to bring him in when they brought in Rioch, but the board weren't having it. But then obviously it didn't work out with Rioch. And then Wenger came in to replace him in August 1996. He said, okay, Al, again, this is kind of management consultant type stuff. He says his goals when he joined Arsenal were to affect results, improve player development, and enhance Arsenal's profile. And the values that he wanted to impose on the club were to be together, to act with class, and to move forward.
Well, if there's anything Arsenal's known for, it's acting with class, all right? Always. I tell you what, if you're in that Arsenal bubble, though, you believe it, don't you? You believe that you are like you're at some exceptional club which does have higher values. I mean, like Ian Wright talked about it as well.
Yeah.
You know, that
Yeah.
like, oh, we do things differently at Arsenal. And like from the outside, it doesn't really seem that way to me, right? It's not like, oh, look at that
Same.
shining city on a hill that is Arsenal. Like, oh, look at those scumbags at Aston Villa, for example. Like, no, they're just a team, just like everyone else.
Here's a question for you. Do you know how Stan Kroenke makes or made his money?
No, I don't know how he makes his money. No.
Well, Stan Kroenke very, very sensibly married into the wealthiest family in America. That was convenient, wasn't it?
Oh, that's a great way of getting rich. Really good way. I've been thinking about doing that.
So the Waltons are the family that founded and owned Walmart, and he married into that family. So that's how he made his money.
Bronky's got Walmart money.
Yeah.
Oh, you see, you live and you learn, eh? Because I knew he was associated with American sports teams, but I didn't know how he managed to do that.
It's property. Property as like he founded his property company, something like I was looking at it like 8 years after he married into the Walton family. So it's not, I'm sure he wasn't just some like schlub on the side of the street or something, but that's where his money comes from. But anyway, Walmart are like famously horrible when it comes to a bunch of things in terms of like how they source their clothing. I'm sure their working conditions suck, and they sell bullets and stuff, don't they?
Yeah, we sure do. And I helped
Hmm.
finance Arsenal yesterday, apparently.
Yeah. Okay. Arsenal. So there you go. This is obviously the kind of the main part of the book. So
Well, we can
again,
do this very quickly because do you know about Arsenal in the Wenger years, Johnny?
yeah,
Yeah, me too. All right. And that's basically it. Like, you've learned nothing. There's nothing to learn here.
he doesn't.
Nothing at all.
Yeah, he doesn't. He doesn't go into any detail really about the events on the pitch. Like you'd like to hear about. He talked about Ferguson with a lot of respect and no affection or anything, but you'd like to hear him just say like, "Oh, that guy was this, he was a son of a that." You know, there's none of that.
Dude, a
And
lot of respect there now. Yeah, a lot of
yeah,
respect there now. But what about the time, son? What about when you like when he got sent off and he went and stood in the crowd and that was a big deal and all he's like, I did not behave properly there, my mind was gone. It's like, come on, more, dude, more. What were people saying to you around you? I mean, like, give me something.
yeah, it definitely lacked that, and not just in the case of Ferguson, just generally, you'd like to hear like of these 450 players that he transferred, you'd like to hear like he alludes to a couple like being having bad attitudes and stuff, but that's what we want ultimately, isn't it? Like who's a prick, who's weirdo? That's what you want.
But
I
even his
think,
big players, he hasn't got that bigger regard for his big players. I mean, he says he always likes to keep a distance from your players, and I don't know, that seems to me. I think if I was a manager, that's the way I'd play it. Like, just give himself a nice bit of distance. But yeah, there's no ringing endorsement of Thierry Henry or Dennis Berg. I mean, he barely mentions Dennis Bergkamp. Like, really doesn't barely mention him. Like, when seems to be the very epitome of technical empathy.
yeah, you're right in that. I think I was thinking about this now. If there was any particular noteworthy absences, and maybe Pennant is one actually, but I think he gives a paragraph to nearly every player who ever played for him, from Pascal Sigan to Thierry Henry, like, you know?
Well, it's more a list, isn't it? Like, I mean, he came into Arsenal and he's saying here there was a very united bunch. Seaman, Adams, Parler, Merson, Keown, Winterburn, Boldley, Dixon. I mean, that is a nice little base, isn't it? And like, they might have been old, but that is a good little base to build it all upon.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then he does say that, like, he brought in, yeah, obviously, this is the part we know, like, he brought in doctors, he brought in nutritionists and all the rest of it. But some physio said these guys are kind of spent. But he said, no, 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 sir. And he persisted. One thing that he brought in a nutritionist who he taught the players how to eat, what to eat, and how to chew, which I thought was an interesting enough little
We
morsel.
have to chew. It's just chew more, right? I mean, that's all you. It's not like chew more on your left. Like, oh, your
Your
technique's horrible.
technique, your
Your
technique
technique's
is off.
terrible there, Keown. Like, you're eating like a cow. No, I mean, it's just chew your food more, right? I mean, that's all it is. Like, that's famous, right? we're meant to chew food like 50, like a ridiculous number of times, but surely nobody does.
Well, it sounds like somebody who's seen a nutritionist.
I heard about this. I think you're meant to chew everything like 50 times or something. And I think I learned that from the forget it, man. Like
Oh, you learned it from what? Go on.
from Nuts in May, the fun hour-long 70s comic show, Nuts in May.
But the thing that Wenger seems to be most proud of is this invincible season, right?
Yes, he's very, very proud of that invincible season. And the season before, they nearly reached an invincible season. I don't believe this whole invincible thing. I don't believe that that was his fucking dream, like to go through a season undefeated. I just don't believe it. It's just it
Mm,
happened, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, that was by design." I mean,
okay.
he meant to win the title, right? And I guess by winning the title, you don't want to lose any games. But I don't believe at the start of the season, Arsene Wenger was going, "This season, I want you to lose no games, but I want you to draw like 13 games." The old the old Invincibles, eh? Like you hear a lot about it, but their points, they got bugger all points. They got like 88. They drew so many games. I mean, I'm not saying
Mm,
it was bad, but by the modern standards, like your Cities and your Liverpools whacking 100 points, Arsenal were nowhere near that.
yeah.
They just
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
lose. And they were glorious. And I'm not trying to take it away. Like the Arsenal team of that era were absolutely spectacular. A dream to watch. It was just a delight to watch them. Obviously not for you, Johnny, because you must have suffered. But from a neutral perspective, Arsenal were the best show in town.
Oh, yeah. And just actually, videos of Arsenal have been popping up a lot on the Adam on the Bookmen podcast Instagram page. Fucking hell, they were good, weren't they?
They were good. And they don't go much into it in the book, but in the pictures, which I guess you don't get on Audible, but there's a few pictures of a game where Arsenal beat Inter 5-1 at the San Siro. And to my mind, that was the greatest performance I'd ever seen by any team. And it was the greatest individual performance I think I'd ever seen by Thierry Henry. It was,
Mm,
they were, the word unplayable gets thrown around a lot, but Henry was unplayable that night. He was unplayable. You couldn't have got near him. If he hadn't played in England, he would have won a Ballon d'Or. Like if he played in Spain, he would have won the Ballon d'Or 2 or 3 times. He was the best player in the world playing for Arsenal. I
mm.
truly believe it.
During the Invincible season, at the start of every match, Sol Campbell would shout "unbeaten" at the start of every game.
Yeah, I bet he didn't. I don't know. That doesn't sound right. I mean, you didn't. You won first game unbeaten. Second game unbeaten. I mean,
I
first
think,
game 1-1 draw at Wigan unbeaten. Like,
and it
I
ended
mean,
with
maybe he said it towards the end. Start of every game, my ass.
Pizzagate. Anyway, the thing, okay, if the Invincibles was the high point of his the high point of the good years, the low point was the Champions League final in 2006, which he has never watched back. Henri
Same
should
as
have.
me.
On,
I mean, I do remember that game, and I remember being absolutely gutted for Arsenal because they deserve something. They deserve some European recognition during those years. Because in the Invincible season, they lost to Chelsea, right? It was Wayne Bridge. Stupid game. They should have won it. Yeah, they
mm,
deserve to win some European silverware. They deserve to be noted as one of the great sides of the modern era.
but yeah, so at this point, the team was kind of coming apart, and this is the year that they lost the Champions League final was probably going to be their last tilt at it because it's also the year that they left Highbury. Vieira had left the previous year, his penalty kick, beating United in the FA Cup final, and Henri left the year that they didn't win the Champions League, and that Henri kind of knew that he was 31 at the time, and he knew that they were going to be tightening their belts and that they wouldn't be winning no Champions League if they didn't win it that year. So that was the end of the Arsenal heyday, really. And I suppose for Arsenal fans and for your neutrals, Arsenal sympathising neutrals, yeah, that was unfortunate for them.
Yeah, it was. And he seems fairly philosophical about this. I mean, he talks about all the players who said, "Oh, we've got to go, coach, because we're not going to win anything with these financial restrictions." Everyone seemed to be fairly aware. But again, I think this is some self-justification a little bit. Now, I know they're not dealing, they didn't have the money that the other teams did. But it was always that thing like fourth place trophy with Arsenal, wasn't it? Like everyone sort of laughed at it, like, "Oh, you got your fourth place trophy again, Arsenal. Maybe Champions League 19 years in a row." But Wenger puts a lot of stock in it, doesn't he? Like, we never finished outside the top four. We never did.
Yeah,
And
so
like, he's very proud of that.
yeah,
Whilst at the time they're jettisoning every single promising player they have.
yeah, but I suppose he is like a builder of futures, and that's what he did here. So I guess this was written when Arteta was already the manager, so it's recent enough. And with that now, Arsenal obviously being back in up at the right up at the very top, almost we'll say. I guess Wenger can kind of look at that with a different, look at that in different light and kind of give himself a lot of credit because ultimately, like I say, he is his own advocate, and what he says is that he essentially turned down all of these offers from all of these other clubs and from national teams to stay there to steer Arsenal from Highbury and their 30,000 seat stadium to 60,000 seat stadium and like all of the debt and all the rest of it that they had to take on. Essentially, he had to run the the business side of the football team uh, on whatever money he made himself, and he had to
Yeah,
keep.
yeah, essentially, yeah. The Emirates is the house that Arsene built, essentially, isn't it? Like, and for that, they had to have a belt tightening which restricted them. But it would seem that by the time that those financial restrictions were over, that was the time for him to go, wasn't it? Because it seems to me that at that point he lost his touch a little bit. So we're looking like 2013, 2014. There was no more magic then. A couple of
Yeah,
FA Cups, which in the old days would have counted for something. But if I
not what
remember,
he.
Arsenal fan TV were not very impressed by a few FA Cup wins at the time, were they?
Yeah, so this book is the footballer's equivalent of Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett, which I think is about building a church, isn't it?
And it's a lot more than just about building a church. I mean, it's about a community. It's about a community over 800 years. I read every one of those fucking books. Like, go on, Follett.
Yeah, so there you go. That's the equivalent. He is the whoever the main character in Pillars of the Earth is.
God,
That's it.
if I could
That
just pull that name. So
yeah.
yes, so enormous credit. So he created the greatest footballing team in my lifetime, certainly in this country, in England. The
When you
Arsenal
say
team.
when you say footballing team, you're using that term deliberately. So what do you mean by that now?
Well, I mean in terms of attractiveness of play, the way they played the game was, yeah, the most attractive football team I've seen in my time watching football in England. I think that's not unfair.
Hmm.
I guess, yeah, who would rival that? No one. I think like the when they played, when they had your Lundberg and your Thierry Henrys and your Bergkamps, no one could play football like that. It was beautiful. So we
What
did
about
that. Go on.
what about the Manchester United and the Busby way?
Just wasn't as fluid.
Okay.
As fluid, giving me a very keen look there across the computer screen. But I mean, I enjoyed watching United in those days as well. But I don't know, the pass and move that Arsenal had, it was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. Seeing Henry on the left, oh, darting in, whoa. I've really got a
Yeah.
crush on Thierry Henry. What a player he was.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, he created you know, one of the greatest footballing sides of the last 30 years. He built Arsenal a new stadium. And he indelibly changed the English game. I mean, with him to thank for the modern fitness, the modern players, that sort of dedication to the job, the lack of drinking. This was all a result of Arsene Wenger, right?
Yeah. He's a great modernizer, I suppose, of English football, wasn't he? He kind of was the death knell of everything we read about in Paul McGrath's book. And
Yeah, man.
I don't mean McGrath specifically, but that whole culture around football.
Yeah, absolutely. McGrath wouldn't have lasted long in a Wenger team, would he?
No, that's not the passion that Wenger wants from his players.
No, it
No,
ain't.
no. Yeah, but like he says that he was actually contractually obliged to stay at Arsenal for 5 years from the bank. The bank insisted that he stay there for 5 years, in order for them to get this financing deal, which is a bit
Well, I'd
funny.
like to see that contract. I mean, what was the bank going to do? Come
Yeah,
around his
that
house and beat him up? Like, I mean,
that one was a bit funny. All right, yeah. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
I'm
but
sure the loan was dependent on him staying. Yeah. And I think I mean, he was a good contract observer, if that's a phrase, which I know that it's not, but he's someone who respected his contract.
of all of the contract observers in football, he is
Oh, he's one of the great contract observers. Oh, old Letici was another Giggsy. Great contract observers.
yeah,
Um,
top 10.
yeah, that's what you say. Uh, but so I think he probably didn't realise that he'd lost his touch and thought that it was the restrictions were stopping Arsenal from doing well. But when they got the money eventually, he bought Mesut Ozil for a fuck ton of cash, right? 50 mil 10
Yeah.
years ago. That was a lot. But yeah, just it never happened for him again, did it? They were always fine. Fourth place, fourth place, fourth place, but never reached those peaks again.
Mm, yeah. Well, like what I mean is it's around this time where he's defending his role and his record without really trying trying to make it look like he's not doing that. And he says here that he could have made two or three times as much money, and he could have joined all of these other teams and had a lot more trophies. But he chose to respect his contract, observe his contract, and to stay there and to build the future the Arsenal way.
Yeah. He was on £8 million a year at the end of his contract.
Yeah, he's done fine. As we mentioned, he doesn't really go into the fact that there was a mob paying for his blood.
Crikey, he doesn't.
Yeah,
Like, and that's something I would have been interested in because having devoted his life, 22 years, like a good third of his life at that point to the club, and everything he brought them, the international recognition, this style of play. They were always the boring Arsenal before he turned up, right? They were just famous. I mean, it was in fucking full Monty. Like they just played an offside line and hit you on the break. And then, I mean, do you remember the absolute? Yeah, people fucking hated him. Like Arsenal Football Club blood. I mean, this is Arsenal Football Club blood. They couldn't stand him. Enough was enough. Genuinely goes, the fans were frustrated. That's all he says. The fans were frustrated. He was getting fucking booed at, screamed at in train stations and stuff by thousands of people. The fans were frustrated.
yeah. Well, he does talk about the kind of when he arrived at Arsenal initially, the way the media published this information about him. Was it kind of essentially that he was going to prostitutes or something like that, something to that effect? Which, if you've read this book, is obviously fanciful notion. He does talk about how that one really shocked him, as you can imagine it would. But
The
yeah,
vile rumors.
it's
Vile
those
rumors.
vile rumors.
To be honest, I don't know what those vile rumors were. I mean, I don't know what that was.
Yeah, I think that was what I inferred was it was something like that. Remember there was something like that about the Chelsea manager.
Well, I don't think they were vile rumors, were they? I think they were real truths, like Avron Grant.
Yeah, Aaron Grant. Yeah.
Jose got in so much trouble when he called him a voyeur, right? Because it was like, oh, you can't call Wenger a voyeur. I mean, what? I don't know what the vile rumors were, and I must have missed them.
Yeah, so and then okay, he's gone. As you say, that is a kind of a gaping omission in the book. And then he kind of winds down by talking about how it was a big loss, obviously, for him in his life and for someone who had spent his whole time doing this every minute of every day. Suddenly he's kind of bereft, I suppose. He's
But
never gone back.
he got to meet his daughter though, so that's nice.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, jeez.
she was 26 years old at the time, like never met her before. Like yeah, so
He never goes to watch the Arsenal. Too painful.
I think that's a good thing. Like,
Never
whenever
go.
you see fucking Fergie sitting there looking miserable watching United, you know that's just putting pressure on the manager. Every time they cut to Fergie in the crowd, it's just putting pressure on the manager they don't need. I think he did right. I think he does right to stay away.
So that's it. And then he took a job as FIFA head of global development. Yeah, and that's it. That's kind of the end of the book. So
Yeah, it peters out very much like Arsene Wenger's career. But he's all right though, because he's happy with himself because you know what he say when he faces God. I want you to be God in this situation, Johnny, and I'm going to be Arsene Wenger.
What have you done with your life?
I tried to win matches.
Is that all?
Uh, you sound disappointed. Uh, I might try to convince you that winning matches is harder than you might think, and that football is important to millions of people's lives, and it creates moments for sharing. God, you like sharing. Moments of joy, you like joy. Also, great sadness too, which is one for the devil. So yeah, so there he is. He's all right with his life and his works. He'll be able to convince God that he tried to win matches in his life.
But what a life he has had, though, to be fair. Just think of Wenger looking exactly as he looked in 1996, but much smaller, walking around France in 1905, rural France in 1954, and then the life he went on to have. Pretty amazing stuff, to be fair to the fella.
I mean, it is amazing stuff, Johnny. But I read this. I'm not jealous. I don't want to be Arsene Wenger. Even when I'm like his age, I don't think I will have wanted to have been him. Like as he says, like he said he didn't know London at all for 10 years. Like just he couldn't get to work. He like in Japan, the only way he knew how to get to work was looking at roads
Advertisements, yeah.
advertising hoardings.
Yeah.
Yeah. He doesn't live in these countries. He lives in his house and the training stadium, the training ground and the stadium, and doesn't really see any of it at all. I mean, genuinely, absolutely obsessed with football.
It'd
And
be like, it'd be fun it's fun to imagine a night out with Wenger and Diego. That would be fun, wouldn't it?
I don't think they spend much time together. It's just,
Diego would peel off
uh,
early enough, I'd say.
I'm going to have a good time now at the hotel room. Oh, yes. I've got a video of Fenerbahce versus Kalanyaspor. There is a talented young African player. No? Diego, where did you go? But yeah, that I don't want to make this my Adamola Bookman pod cliche, but here's a man with absolutely fuck all hinterland. Like, there's nothing. It's football, 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 and nothing else. Like, nothing else. Apparently, he's read some books now. He's retired. I read an interview with Simon Cooper with him now. That 40 years he spent managing, that's all he did, eh? That's all he did. He managed to, like, get a daughter in, but that's all he did.
Do you think that like Ferguson famously invited managers up for wine, glass of wine? Would he have nipped up for a little bit of wine with Fergie, do you think?
Presumably at first, but maybe
Eh,
not.
Then the siren song of Fenerbahce, the young African player of Fenerbahce was too much to resist.
I have somewhere else I have to be. Maybe that the vile rumours. He was wanking over fucking like 15-year-old African footballers. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so how many vile rumors out of five would you give this book?
Yeah, nice. I was wondering what we do. Yeah, vile rumours. Yeah, I'm gonna give this two vile rumours out of five, Johnny. I don't think I learned a single bloody thing other than how to spell the word inspiration and education. Uh, Yeah. You learn nothing about Wenger here. You learn nothing at all. I knew everything, every single thing. Okay, I didn't know that how he got to Nancy, but crikey, Mikey, I don't care either, to be honest.
I suppose I would have been interested in the Monaco and the Japan stuff, but
Well,
yeah.
there is no Japan stuff.
Well, there's
There's
him
nothing at all.
shacking up with Boro, and there's a lot of hard work. Yeah. I suppose he is a little bit joyless, I suppose, but I enjoyed it. Like it's as dry as you can get. I always, as a United fan, Liverpool fans would always kind of talk about sensible financial management of their team. So I think Liverpool fans would enjoy this book.
If you like
Yeah.
passion, this is the book for you. If you like
Well, if
nasty
you
dads, this is the book for you.
if you want someone very dispassionately talking about passion, this is the book for
Yeah,
this,
well,
this is the book for you.
yeah, that's nice. That's nice. That's the one. Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, when I bought this book, so I've actually got the physical book. You know what the endorsements from the newspapers and other managers and supporters are on the book? None. Not a single fucking word is on it. Like, no one had a nice word to say about this fucking book. Not one person.
Yeah, okay, that's funny. Yeah, like
There's no endorsements.
I enjoyed it more than you. I'd give it three vile rumors out of five, I think.
Oh, you nearly made me spit my coffee out. 3 out of 5. I think this was worse than Drogba. I do. I think
What?
it was. I think it was worse than Drogba. I
No.
learned more about Didier Drogba than I did about Arsene Wenger. All right. Well, yeah, you did enjoy that more than me. Maybe it would have been more fun listening to Arsene prattle on in his enchanting voice.
Yeah, well, there was a certain appeal to that, and just on the language, as you're talking about his voice, it says on the internet that he is fluent in Alsatian, French, English, German, Spanish, Italian, and Japanese. And then I looked at a video of him speaking Japanese. That man is not fluent in
No, I'd be
Japanese.
very fucking surprised if he was. Like, yeah.
What's next, Al? Tell me.
So next week we're going to move away from Arsenal and we're going to move on to Manchester United and the chicken-loving Patrice Evra. I love this game. Well, I love it too, sometimes more than others. So yeah, so in 2 weeks we shall be reviewing I Love This Game by Patrice Evra.
The chicken licking Patrice Evra.
Lovely Patrice Evra. You gotta love him.
Yeah, he seems like a very likable chap.
You ever
Okay,
seen him doing his song about Frank Lampard?
I don't think so. No, I'll look it up.
Well, that was something fun to look at. Like,
Okay, okay. Well, thank you, Alistair,
thank
and
you, Johnny.
thanks for listening, folks. Thanks to Dara for the music, and please check us out on Instagram and Twitter and all that jazz.
Take care, folks. Have a lovely couple of weeks, and we'll speak to you soon.
Let your body spin like there is nothing in life but dancing. I can't keep my hands off you as if this looked like